Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. We always try to pick topics that our listeners are interested in, and based on our data, it looks like a lot of you are thinking about growth. So today we're going to be diving into an article that talks about, well, throws out the old marketing funnel, to be honest.
Well, with the old and with the new, right?
Yeah, exactly. And this article calls this new model growth loops. Pretty kitschy name.
Yeah, it is. And, the article really makes you think, how are companies like Netflix, LinkedIn, even Venmo using this to just explode?
Okay, so before we go too deep down the growth loop rabbit hole, let's take a step back. Can you give us a quick refresher on the good old ARRR funnel, just so everyone's on the same page?
Sure. The ARR funnel stands for acquisition, activation, retention, referral, revenue. And basically for years, this was like the marketing Bible. It was all about moving customers through these very specific stages in a linear way. Get them in, get them to take action, keep them coming back, get them to tell their friends, and then boom, revenue.
Right. I think we've all been on the receiving end of that. Like you visit a website for 2 seconds and suddenly you're seeing ads for their stuff everywhere you go online.
Yeah, exactly. That's the classic funnel in action. But the article we're talking about today argues that the funnel model, well, it might be starting to show its age.
Okay, so the funnel might be getting a little rusty, but why? What's wrong with it?
Well, the article points out four key weaknesses. One of the biggest ones is silos. The funnel often leads to different teams within a company working in isolation.
So you've got the marketing team over here focused on getting new customers and the product team over there trying to keep the existing customers happy, but they're not really talking to each other, right?
Exactly. And that can lead to, well, a pretty disjointed experience for the customer. And then there's the issue of cost. The customer acquisition costs have been, skyrocketing in recent years. And this reliance on constantly pouring money into the top of the funnel, it's just not sustainable for a lot of businesses.
It's like you're on this marketing treadmill, right?
Yeah.
You have to keep running faster and faster just to stay in the same place.
Exactly.
Okay, so the old funnel model might be showing some cracks. What's the alternative?
That's where growth loops come in. Instead of that linear path, imagine a closed system where what you put in is constantly being reinvested and amplified, creating this continuous cycle of growth.
So instead of pouring water into a leaky bucket, you're creating a system where the water is constantly recycled and used to power more growth.
I like that analogy. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And the article highlights some serious advantages to this. First, it encourages all the teams to work together. It's not about just focusing on their own little piece of the funnel, but they're all working towards creating this system that, benefits everybody.
I can see how that would be a huge shift, getting everyone rowing in the same direction. But the article also mentions something about growth loops creating a unique competitive advantage. That caught my attention.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting because a well-designed growth loop is deeply intertwined with the specific value your product offers. It's not just about marketing tactics. It's baked into the core of what you do, which makes it much harder for competitors to just, copy.
So it's you're not just building a product, you're building a growth engine that's uniquely tailored to your business. I like that. But I need some concrete examples here. I got to see how this works in the real world. The article mentions some pretty big names: Netflix, LinkedIn, Venmo. Let's start with Netflix. What's their secret?
Well, Netflix is a textbook example of how a growth loop can drive engagement. Think about their recommendation engine, right?
Yeah, the more you watch, the better it gets at suggesting stuff you'll actually like.
And then the more you like what you're watching, well, the more you engage with the platform and the cycle continues.
And we've all been there. You start watching one show, then Netflix is all like, hey, based on your viewing history, you might also like this. And boom, suddenly it's 3 a.m. and you're 5 seasons deep into something you'd never even heard of. It's like magic.
It's that loop in action. And the article, it actually shows a chart comparing, linear growth to the kind of exponential growth a well-designed loop can create. The difference is crazy.
Okay, that's impressive. So it's not just about keeping existing users glued to the screen. It's also about attracting new subscribers by showing them stuff they'll actually want to watch. That makes sense. But what about LinkedIn? Their growth loop seems pretty different, right?
Yeah, LinkedIn is more about network effects. The basic loop there is pretty simple. You sign up, you connect with people you know, and then you're encouraged to invite other people to join. I don't know. And those new users just repeat the cycle. It's simple, but super effective.
I get it. And sometimes it feels like LinkedIn's really pushing those connections, those people you may know, suggestions that never seem to end. But hey, it's clearly working for them. Okay, so we've got Netflix and LinkedIn. What about Venmo? How do they get everyone hooked on sending each other money?
Venmo is interesting. They tapped into the power of like social interaction and ease of use. Sending and receiving money is just like so easy and fun on Venmo that it practically became like a social activity itself.
Yeah, have you ever felt that pressure to join an app just because everyone else is using it?
Oh, absolutely.
Venmo turned, like, payments into a social experience.
hmm
Smart move.
And to add to that, there's Substack. They've got a fascinating loop based on content creators.
Substack.
Yeah.
That's a good one. I've definitely seen more and more writers and journalists heading over to Substack these days. How's that loop work?
So when a creator joins Substack and starts publishing, they naturally promote their newsletter to their existing audience and encourage them to subscribe.
Right.
Makes sense. And then some of those subscribers are so impressed with Substack, they decide to like start their own publications, which of course fuels the loop even more.
So they're using their creators' audiences to drive growth. It's like a built-in network effect from day one.
Mhm.
Pretty clever. Okay, so we've got Netflix, LinkedIn, Venmo, Substack. All these companies are rocking their own unique loops. But, like, how do you actually build one of these things? Is there, like, a secret formula?
Well, there are some common patterns and frameworks, but the real magic is in like truly understanding your product and your audience. The article mentions a few main types of loops: viral, paid, user-generated content.
Right.
But it's not like a one-size-fits-all thing. You've got to figure out what works best for you.
Okay, so if I'm thinking about my own work, I should be thinking, which type of loop makes sense for my goals and my audience?
Exactly. You've got to ask yourself, what actions or behaviors can I encourage that will naturally lead to more users or customers?
So it's about mapping the loop, engaging users at the right points, and getting everyone on the team working together. This is making sense, but one thing's bugging me. The article keeps saying how important retention and engagement are for a loop to really work. Why is that so crucial?
Well, think of it this way. A loop is only as strong as its weakest link. If people aren't sticking around and actually using your product, the whole thing falls apart. You could have the most brilliant loop in the world, but if people aren't engaged, it's not going to work.
Yeah, it's like building this amazing roller coaster, but no one wants to ride it more than once. What's the point? So the challenge is to figure out what's going to keep people hooked on your product or service in the long run.
You got it.
And that's a question we're going to be exploring in much more depth as this deep dive continues.
It's interesting. A lot of the companies that are really into growth loops are actually using their own products to fuel their growth. Like they're practicing what they preach.
Oh, really? That's fascinating. How are they doing that?
Well, you see, some companies, they have this strategy where they kind of subtly incorporate their branding and calls to action within the product itself. Think like email widgets or those little capture forms.
Oh, I see.
So when someone is interacting with these elements, they're gently being nudged towards the brand. It's almost subconscious.
So it's not about, like, hitting people over the head with ads. It's more about strategically placing your brand within the context of the product that they're already using.
Clever. Exactly. And the really smart companies, they're tracking everything. They want to measure how effective those little prompts are at driving actual signups, conversions, and, ultimately revenue.
So they're not just hoping for the best. They're actually looking at the data to see what's working. That's a data-driven approach I can get behind. But let's be real, building a successful growth loop can't be as simple as just setting up a few prompts and, tracking some metrics.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's definitely not a set it and forget it kind of thing. To create a really effective growth loop, you have to understand the entire customer journey,
Okay.
inside and out. You got to be willing to experiment, to try new things, and to constantly optimize based on what you learn.
So it's more like, a powerful tool that you need to wield with skill and precision.
Exactly.
You need to know what you're doing, and you got to be adaptable.
Precisely. And remember, it's not just about attracting new users, it's about keeping them engaged and coming back for more. Retention. That's crucial.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. What's the point of having this fancy loop if everyone just jumps on for a quick ride and then jumps off,
Right.
You want people to stick around to become, like, loyal users who are invested in what you're offering.
Absolutely. And that's where the real challenge lies.
Mm-hmm.
Creating an experience that is so compelling, so valuable, so, indispensable that people can't imagine their lives without it.
It's like trying to understand the deepest desires of the human heart, but in a business context.
Uh-huh. Yeah, kind of.
It's about figuring out What makes people tick, what drives them, what keeps them coming back for more.
Exactly. And if it were easy, everyone would be doing it. It takes a lot of thought, a lot of experimentation, and a lot of empathy, really, to get it right.
And so how are companies approaching this challenge? Are there any like common threads or trends?
Well, there are a few different strategies. Some companies are focusing on like personalization and customization, tailoring the experience to each individual user.
Oh, like how Netflix recommends movies based on what you've watched, or Spotify with their personalized playlists. It's like they're reading your mind.
Exactly. And then you've got companies that are building communities around their products, creating this like sense of belonging and shared purpose.
Ah, so like those online forums where people geek out about their favorite video game or TV show. It's about giving people a space to connect with other people who share their passions.
You got it. And then there's gamification. You know, using points, badges, rewards to encourage certain behaviors, make the experience more engaging.
Oh, like those fitness apps that give you virtual trophies for hitting your goals.
Yes.
Clever way to tap into that natural desire for achievement, right?
Exactly. And it's all about finding ways to keep people, engaged and invested for the long haul. It's not just about the product itself, it's about the whole ecosystem you build around it.
So it's about building an experience, not just a product.
You got it.
It's about building a relationship, not just a, transaction.
You nailed it. And I think this is where things get really interesting for businesses of all shapes and sizes. It's not just about the big tech giants with their massive budgets,
Right.
Every company, every entrepreneur, every creator can benefit from thinking about how to build a loyal following and a sustainable growth engine.
That's really encouraging. So you're saying that anyone can build a successful growth loop, regardless of their, size or their budget.
Absolutely. The beauty of this is there's no one-size-fits-all solution. Every business, every product, every audience is unique. The key is to understand your own unique strengths, your assets, and then design a loop that leverages those to create a truly compelling experience for your target audience.
Okay, so if I'm hearing you correctly, the takeaway here is that growth loops are powerful.
Yeah.
But they require, like, thoughtfulness, experimentation, a deep understanding of your audience. It's not a quick fix. It's a long-term strategy that requires constant learning and adaptation.
Well said. And remember, it's a journey, not a destination. The companies that are really successful are the ones that are constantly iterating, testing, refining their loops. They're not afraid to experiment, to fail, and to learn from their mistakes.
So embrace the messiness,
Right.
the uncertainty, the constant evolution. Got it. But how do you know when you're on the right track? Like, what are the signs that your loop is actually, working?
That's a great question. One of the most important things is to track your metrics closely. You need to be able to see how your loop is performing, where are the bottlenecks and what's driving the most growth.
So data is key, as always. But what kind of metrics should we be looking at?
Well, it depends on, your specific loop and your goals. But some of the common ones include things like activation rate, how many of your new users are actually engaging with your product or service.
Right.
Retention rate, how many of your users are like sticking around over time, referral rate, how many of your users are referring new users. And then, of course, customer lifetime value, how much revenue are you generating from each customer over their lifetime.
Okay, so you need to keep a close eye on those numbers, see how they're trending over time. But beyond the numbers, are there any other signs that your loop is, gaining traction?
Definitely. One of the best indicators is organic growth. Are you seeing more and more people signing up for your product or service without you having to spend a ton of money on advertising?
Right.
That's a really good sign that your loop is starting to, work its magic.
It's like a snowball effect.
Yeah.
Once you get the loop spinning, it starts to generate its own momentum. But building a successful growth loop isn't just about the technical aspects, right?
Yeah.
There's a human element to it as well.
Absolutely. One of the most important things is to create a great user experience. If people aren't enjoying using your product or service, they're not going to stick around no matter how clever your growth loop is.
So you need to make sure that your product is easy to use, solves a real problem for your users, and, that you're there to help them if they run into any issues.
You got it. And it's also really important to listen to your users and get their feedback. They can often provide valuable insights into what's working, what's not.
So it's about building a relationship with your users, not just treating them like numbers on a spreadsheet.
Precisely. And that's one of the most rewarding aspects of building a growth loop. You're not just focused on acquiring new customers, but you're building a community of loyal users who are passionate about what you do.
I love that. It's like building a movement, not just a business,
Yeah.
but building a growth loop. It can feel a bit daunting, especially for smaller companies or, solopreneurs who might not have a lot of resources.
I understand. But remember, you don't have to do everything at once.
Right.
Start small, focus on one key area, and then build from there.
So, baby steps. Pick one piece of the puzzle and just focus on getting that right before you move on to the next one.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to ask for help. There are lots of great resources out there, including articles, books, online communities.
All right. That's really helpful advice. So if I'm a small business owner, an entrepreneur listening to this, where should I start?
I would say the most important thing is to just get clear on your goals. What are you actually trying to achieve with your growth loop? Do you want to increase brand awareness, generate more leads, or, boost sales?
Okay, so define your objectives. That makes sense. What's next?
Once you know what you want to achieve, you can start to identify those, like key actions or behaviors that will drive those results. What are the things that your users need to do in order to move you closer to your goals?
So, for example, if my goal is to increase brand awareness, I might focus on getting people to share my content on social media. Or if my goal is to generate more leads, I might create like a lead magnet that encourages people to sign up for my email list.
Exactly. And once you've identified those key actions, you can start to design your loop around them. Think about how you can encourage those behaviors and make it easy for people to take those actions.
So it's all about creating a clear path for your users to follow, a path that leads them towards your goals.
Precisely. And remember, it's a journey, not a destination. Don't be afraid to experiment, to iterate, and to, adjust your loop as you go.
Great advice. This has been incredibly insightful. But before we wrap up, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the future of growth loops. Like, where do you see this going in the next few years?
That's a great question. I think we're just scratching the surface of what's possible with growth loops. As technology keeps evolving, I think we'll see even more creative and sophisticated applications.
Oh, like what? Give me a sneak peek into the future.
Well, for starters, I think we'll see a lot more personalization and AI-powered optimization.
Right.
Growth loops will become even more tailored to like individual users,
I see.
delivering the right message at the right time to, maximize engagement.
So it's all about getting even more targeted, more personalized, using data and technology to create these like hyper-relevant experiences.
Exactly. And I also think we'll see a lot more integration between, different platforms and channels.
Okay.
Growth loops will become less about like isolated tactics and more about creating these like seamless omni-channel experiences that span the entire customer journey.
That's a fascinating prediction.
Yeah.
So growth loops will become even more integrated and holistic, connecting different touch points and creating this unified experience for the user.
Precisely. And as the lines between, the physical and the digital world continue to blur, I think we'll also see more experimentation with like hybrid growth loops that incorporate both online and offline elements.
Wow. That opens up like a whole new world of possibilities. It sounds like growth loops are going to become even more powerful and like pervasive in the years to come.
I think so. And for the businesses that embrace this approach, the rewards will be significant. They'll be able to build stronger relationships with their customers, create more sustainable growth, and ultimately achieve greater success.
Well, that's an inspiring note to end on. I'm feeling energized, excited about the potential of growth loops.
Me too. And I hope our listeners are feeling the same way.
That future sounds like pretty incredible. It's amazing to think how much growth loops have evolved even in just the last few years.
Yeah, for sure. And as we've been talking about all these different examples and strategies, one thing that keeps coming back to me is like the importance of long-term thinking.
I think that's a crucial point. It's so easy to get like caught up in chasing the latest, marketing fads or trying to find that one quick hack that'll magically solve all your problems.
Yeah, growth loops, they're not about quick wins or, short-term hacks. It's about building a sustainable system, something that can like compound over time and create lasting value for both you and your customers.
So it's about playing the long game, focusing on building something solid and sustainable
Yeah.
rather than just chasing, fleeting trends.
Exactly. And that requires a certain mindset. It means, prioritizing the creation of real value for your users, fostering a strong sense of community, and continuously iterating and improving your, product or service. It's about making sure that every piece of your loop contributes to a greater whole.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So if I'm like a business owner, an entrepreneur listening to this, what's the one piece of advice you would give me about growth loops? What's the most important thing to keep in mind?
I'd say it all starts with a deep understanding of your customers and their needs. You need to truly grasp their pain points, their aspirations, their goals. How can your product or service help them achieve, what they're striving for?
Okay.
Once you have that clear understanding, you can start designing a growth loop that genuinely aligns with their motivations and their behaviors.
So it's all about putting the customer at the center of everything you do, really understanding what makes them tick.
Absolutely. And don't be afraid to experiment.
Right.
Try different approaches, track your results carefully, and just see what resonates best with your, specific audience.
Okay.
There's no one-size-fits-all solution when it comes to growth loops. So be prepared to adapt and evolve as you learn more about your customers and their needs.
That's really empowering. It means that, anyone can find success with growth loops, even if they don't have like a huge budget or a team of, experts behind them.
Exactly. And remember, the learning process is just as important as the, end result. Embrace the journey, embrace the challenges, and don't be afraid to make mistakes along the way.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of growth loops, I want to leave our listeners with a final thought-provoking question.
Yeah.
If you were designing a growth loop for your own business or project, what would be the key elements? What would be that driving force behind it?
That's a great question to, ponder. For me, it always comes back to creating an experience that is so valuable, so delightful, so indispensable that people can't help but, share it with others. That's the magic ingredient, the spark that ignites the loop and keeps it spinning.
Beautifully said. So there you have it. Growth loops are a powerful tool for building sustainable long-term growth. But remember, they require thoughtfulness, experimentation, and a deep understanding of your target audience. So go out there, explore, experiment, and find your own unique loop.
And remember, the journey is just as important as the destination. Enjoy the ride.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. And until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep those loops spinning.